Well, if you are visiting here with us this morning, we are in a series on Ecclesiastes. So we are in chapter 3, as Sean just read from a moment ago. So if you were expecting just a really uplifting and encouraging sermon, you might want to go to another church later today. No, just kidding. I think there is something really, really good for us here. But of course, Ecclesiastes is a unique book of the Bible. And it has this really stark sense of realism to it. And it really, it kind of strips away all of the niceties and the nice sounding things that we can describe life with, and just strips it away to what is really there. And what we find there is something that is good and is beautiful. But one thing that I have noticed living with young children in the house is that they experience time differently than I do. Now, a lot of you guys know me. You know I'm not known for my keen awareness of time, but if you think that I'm bad, you should see my kids. They don't move through the day with a sense of urgency. They're not driven by schedules and calendars and clocks. And they really know how to live in the moment. And to be honest, I'm kind of jealous of that sometimes. Like, wouldn't it be nice to just move through the day, you're fully engaged with whatever is before you, and you trust that somebody else is going to get you to where you need to be and take care of all the things for you. Now, I'm not saying that we should just throw out our clocks and our calendars, but I think that there is an analogous way that we are to relate to God. And if we are willing to receive the wisdom that the preacher in Ecclesiastes offers, I think we will be better off. Remember that Ecclesiastes begins with the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Many believe this to be Solomon, though he is never mentioned by name in the book. But the preacher takes a critical approach in his search for meaning. And now in our passage here today, he turns to the subject of the times and the seasons. So our passage begins with the preacher. He's giving us this poem about the seasons and the appointed times. And verse 1 is a summary of the whole poem. Verse 1, for everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. So the poem is giving us this overarching picture of the human experience. It's meant to touch on every area of life. It is the human experience in a nutshell. And so we begin with life and death. There's a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant, a time to pluck up what is planted. That's easy enough for us to understand, right? We're all born. We're cast into this world. We didn't decide to be born. We didn't decide when to be born, but we are born, and in a similar way, we don't decide when it's time for us to die. There's a season for planting. There's a season to pluck up what is planted. This weekend, we planted our garden at home. We have some raised beds, and even though we're a little late, we're behind schedule, but we do it because we expect that in a few months there will be fruits and vegetables and flowers to come up. And then, of course, when the time has run its course, it'll be time to uproot what we have planted. The plants are no longer fruitful. Now imagine if we had waited until November to try to plant tomatoes. I don't think that would have worked out well. You have to plant according to the season. So we move from life and death to a time to kill and to destroy, to heal and to build. War is simply a fact of life in this fallen world. And what that means is at certain times it becomes appropriate to kill and to destroy, either in self-defense or to seek to preserve human life or human flourishing. And when war is over, it's time to rebuild, it's time to heal and to move on. There are times to express emotion. The birth of a child or a wedding ceremony is an appropriate time to celebrate, to laugh, and yes, even though we are Baptists, even to dance. On the flip side, there's a time to weep and to mourn at the death of a loved one, during a national tragedy, or at the loss of a relationship. So I think you see where we're going here. There's a time for life and death, for killing and for healing, for mourning and dancing, and there's a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, naturally. So obviously that sounds a little bit weird to us, but what this is actually is probably a reference, again, to wartime and peacetime. So during wartime, it was common to cast stones on the enemy's field so that they would not be fruitful. And then during peacetime, it was appropriate to gather stones off of your field so that they could be productive. In a similar way, there's a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, even those who would be your enemy. During wartime, you do not embrace those you are fighting against. There's a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep, and a time to cast away. We might understand these as references to possessions and to investments. So if you lose something valuable, it is appropriate to go look for it, right? But at some point, if you can't find it, you have to consider it lost and move on with life. In a similar way, when it comes to how we invest our money, our resources, if an investment is good, if it is returning value, then it's good to hold on to the investment, right? But if a bad investment, if an investment goes bad, sometimes it's better to give up, to cut your losses and move on. There's a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. We might understand this as a reference to grieving loss. In the ancient world, tearing one's clothes was a public sign of mourning. And in a similar way, keeping silence was a way of showing respect to those who were grieving. Think about the story of Job and his friends. His friends sat with him in silence for days on end for respect for him in his time of grief and the things that he had lost. So there's a time when those things are appropriate. And yet, there comes a time where it's time to mend the clothes that were torn. It's time to break the silence, to heal, and to move on. And then finally, there's a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. So for those of you counting, we have 7 pairs of times. 7 pairs of times throughout this poem. And 7 is, in the Bible, it is the number of perfection or being complete. So I think what we're supposed to get is a sense of this is a complete picture of what life is like here on earth. All of the things that we go through, the good and the bad, it's a full sort of snapshot of life on earth. There's times of rejoicing, there's times of sorrow, there's times of war, there's times of peace. And some of y'all who have been on this earth longer than me understand this better, that the world is in flux. Nothing is constant. Everything will come and go no matter how much we convince ourselves otherwise. The truth is that we don't know what's around the corner. So this is what the preacher observes about life. And then in verse 9, he poses this question: what gain has the worker from his toil? So at first that may seem kind of confusing because I thought we were talking about times and seasons, and now why is he talking about work? But think about, in the poem, how everything gets canceled out, right? There's a time to be born, there's a time to die, no gain. There's a time to kill, there's a time to heal, there's no gain. There's a time to weep and a time to laugh, no gain. Everything is canceled out. And so in a way, I think what he's saying is, what is there to gain? What is the meaning of this? What is the purpose of all of this? What you labor, you strive, you worry, but what is there to gain in life? And throughout the poem, we do see rightful human action, but it's always in response to the circumstances outside of one's control, right? It's always in correlation with the season or the time that has been set. Yes, we plant, but we don't determine when the season for planting is. We seek peace, but we can't control whether or not an enemy nation will attack. We invest and we seek financial security for ourselves and our families, but we cannot control when the market will crash. We enjoy life. We celebrate what is good, but we cannot keep ourselves and those we love from dying. See, our lives are always lived in relation to the season, and we cannot escape this. So the question for us is, how do we deal with the ever-changing, unpredictable nature of life? One way we can answer this is to simply say that these realities are merely the result of chance. That there is no higher authority arranging the events in our lives. It is all just chance. And so if that's true, then what the only thing we can do is to seek to gain as much power and as much control over our lives and our circumstances as we can. We must take the bull of life by the horns and seek to ensure that we have the best outcome possible for ourselves, whatever that is. Now, I don't know if you have ever personally jumped on the back of a bull, but everyone I've ever seen do it has only lasted about 8 to 10 seconds. Another option is that for those who are fearful enough to not believe that we are the only ones controlling our destiny, is to look at the good things in life from coming from God. But the bad things can't come from him. They must come from some other source. We believe that it is God who does good things to us and for us, but surely the negative experiences, the bad things in life, that can't come from God. They must have another source. So maybe maybe we blame ourselves and our sin, or maybe it's the result of some other person's sin, or maybe the work of another spiritual power like Satan. Think about it. So when good things happen to us, how quick are we to credit God with them? I just got a promotion. That was all God. My investments are up. God is looking out for me. Maybe the Lord has blessed my family with good health. But when the bad things happen, well, surely that wasn't God's doing. We maybe even say things like, the devil is really trying to hold me down. We don't want to put that on God. It must be something else. And as good Southern religious people, that seems right to us in a sense, right? But unfortunately, if we believe that God is only sovereign over the good things in life, what this will lead to is we will treat him like a genie in a bottle. We will do what we need to do to make him happy so that he will give us wealth and health and prosperity. And so in either case, we will seek to manipulate the world around us and our circumstances, or we will seek to manipulate God. But either way, we won't succeed. We'll be filled with anxiety, and we'll miss the point of it all. But the good news is that if we're willing, the preacher in Ecclesiastes will show us a better way. The preacher is working with a different assumption, and it's implicit throughout this passage. God is sovereign over all things. It's the main idea. God is sovereign over all things. So let's look at how that is evident in what the preacher observes. In verse 10, I've seen the busyness that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. He has made everything beautiful in its time. So first we see that both the task and the times come from God. All of the human activity that we see in verses 1 through 8 that occupy our time and our energy throughout our lives, from planting to working and to dancing to mourning, even to destroying, those things are given by God to do at the appropriate time. And it is God who makes everything beautiful in its time. Or another way is to understand is He is the one who brings everything about at the appropriate time. And so what this means is that there's nothing that happens on earth apart from His sovereign hand. God is in control of the seasons and the weather. He is in control over the rise and fall of the nations. He is in control over the crops and the markets. He is in control over life and death. He brings about all things in their time according to His will and His good pleasure. And then the preacher observes, also He has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. So God has given us an awareness of the past and the future. This is one thing that distinguishes us from animals, that we don't merely live in the moment. We can look back on the past. We can learn from it. We can contemplate what it means, and we can look forward to the future. We can anticipate and plan. But the one thing that we cannot do, according to this passage, we cannot know all that God is doing. We cannot know all that God is doing, and we cannot know why He is doing what He is doing. And so to summarize these first observations that the preacher makes is that God brings about all things according to His will. He has given us the task to respond in that time accordingly, and He has given us the ability to contemplate the past and the future, and yet He has not revealed all His purposes to us. And so the preacher draws two conclusions. Verses 12 and 13. I perceived that there is nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Also that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in all his toil. This is God's gift to man. Now, it may sound like the preacher has just conceded this. It may sound like what he's saying is God is in charge, we can't control anything, so the best we can do is just suck it up and try to enjoy and make the most of it. But I think what he's actually doing is he's offering us something beautiful. And this brings us to our first point. Receive the gift. Receive the gift. The gift that is offered is to be joyful, to do good, to take pleasure in eating and drinking and working. Think about it. How would your life be different if you stopped trying to control things beyond your control? What would happen if you gave up on trying to build the perfect life for yourself? Or what would your mental state be like if your sense of security and value was not tethered to the markets or to the news or to the success of your children or your retirement plan or your health? See, if you believed that God was really in control of everything, that nothing happens outside of His will, that He uses both good things and bad things to bring about His good purposes, you could be free. Free from crippling anxiety, you could be free to be joyful. Free from being self-absorbed, you could be free to do good to others. And free from selfish ambition, you could be free to find great enjoyment in the simple gifts of life. Sharing a meal with your family, going to coffee with a friend, working with your hands. Now, I'm not trying to be idealistic here. This will not erase the less pleasant experiences in our life, but when we understand that God is in fact sovereign over all things and that he is working everything for his good purposes, we can begin to walk by faith. We can learn, as Job did, to receive the good and the bad from God's hand and trust his purposes. See, Jesus taught a similar idea in the Sermon on the Mount. Therefore, I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? And which of you, by being anxious, can add a single hour to his span of life? And why are you anxious about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin, yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which today is alive and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will he not much more clothe you? O you of little faith, do not be anxious, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the Gentiles seek after these things. And your heavenly Father knows that you need them all. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. So the question is, do you want to live a joyful life? Do you want to do good? Do you want to enjoy the simple gifts that God provides? Then remember that God is in the heavens. He has set the times. He will bring all things to pass at the right time. And it is not for you to decide. Your task is simply to receive each day as a gift from God. And when we are tempted to worry and to try to control things beyond our control, we can look to something like Psalm 131 that says this, O Lord, my heart is not lifted up. My eyes are not raised too high. I do not occupy myself with things too great and too marvelous for me. But I have calmed and quieted my soul like a weaned child with its mother. Like a weaned child is my soul within me. O Israel, hope in the Lord from this time forth and forevermore. Notice that the psalmist says, I don't occupy myself with things too great and too marvelous for me. Controlling every circumstance of your life is something that is too great and too marvelous for you. But it is not too great and too marvelous for God. So hope in the Lord. In the first conclusion, the preacher invites us to receive the gift. Now let's go on to the second conclusion, verses 14 and 15. I perceive that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. God has done it so that people fear before him. That which is already has been. That which is to be already has been, and God seeks what has been driven away. The conclusion points us to the fact that it is in his ordering of all things, God is all powerful. What God does cannot be undermined in any way. In his appointing of the seasons and in his control of history over every human event, God's plan and purpose will prevail absolutely. You see, God is not just another actor on the world scene. God is the one behind it all, orchestrating everything. And verse 15 shows us that God is outside of time itself. That which is already has been. That which is to be already has been. And God seeks what has been driven away. What is happening now has already happened in the mind of God. What will happen tomorrow has already happened in the mind of God. God is not constrained as we are by time and by space. This God is not like us. We are limited in our power. We can plan, we can act, but we can be thwarted, we can be undermined, we can be stopped by things outside of our control. But not the God of the Bible. He is unlimited in his power. As the creator of time and space, he stands outside of time and space. He is not restricted by them. All that he does will endure forever. And such a God necessitates a certain response on our part. That brings us to our second point. Revere the giver. Things that are big and powerful elicit this natural response in us that we might call fear or reverence or awe. Now, I saw this on the face of my son Judah. A couple weeks ago, we were at Disney World. We were at the Magic Kingdom, and we were watching a parade come through. The kids were loving it. There were these big, colorful floats with princesses and Disney characters on each one, dancing, waving, having a great time. And then around the corner comes this massive, lifelike dragon. And it was Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty. If you've ever seen that movie, that is a scary dragon. Its head was held high over the crowds, its tail swinging back and forth, and then all of a sudden it stopped and spewed fire from its mouth. And we were like right there, like we could feel the heat coming off the flame. And Judah just stood there completely still, in awe at the powerful beast before him. And I think when we rightly see that it is God who orders all things, that he alone can bring all things about in their proper time, that he alone is in control over life and death and over the seasons, over the warring of the nations, when we see God's absolute power to do what he pleases, we will be like Judah before the dragon. We will be filled with fear and reverence and awe. And the incredible news for us is that this God set the times for the most glorious event in history. In Galatians 4, Paul says, when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law, so that we might receive adoption as sons. You see, God set the times. He orchestrated the events of human history so that at the right time, under the right circumstances, he would send forth his Son to be born of a poor Jewish woman, to live a life perfectly obedient to God, to bring the kingdom of God to earth, to be accused by the Jewish leaders, to be killed by the Romans, to be buried in Joseph's tomb, and to be raised from the dead on the third day, so that you, sitting in the pew some 2,000 years later, could be welcomed into the family of God as a son. If God has set the times, if he has worked in history in such a way to bring this about, can we not trust him with everything else? In both the good times and the bad, can we not say, God, I don't know what you are doing. I don't know why you are doing it, but I know you are powerful and I know you are good. Can we not learn to receive each moment, each day, each circumstance from God? Can we learn to be joyful, doing good, finding pleasure in God's simple gifts to us. God is sovereign over all things. So receive the gift and revere the giver.